Hello, everyone. Welcome back for day 5. Can you believe it, Melanie? We made it.
We did. These are always so fun, but then it's like the week gets away from you. I'm like, day 5. It's like
I
so busy
know.
and so like fast. It's awesome.
And here we are on Friday, and we're
Yes.
just very excited for today, another day. And we just want to say thank you to everyone who's been with us this week, and thank you for all of the positive feedback. We love getting to read your comments for those of you saying that this has been just so eye-opening and that you've learned so much and you enjoy listening. We're just so excited. We're so happy. So today we are talking all about what if it's too late, right? So this whole week we have talked so much about how we could be more proactive, how we could be more preventative when it comes to kids having meltdowns or kids getting dysregulated, but inevitably they will melt down. The children will get dysregulated. We will always have that happen. So we want you to be prepared in the case that that happens. Real quick before we get started, if you missed the announcement yesterday, we did let everyone know that we are enrolling for the sensory certificate course. So if this is something that's been on your mind, on your brain, on your heart, and you are ready to jump into that with us, we would absolutely love to have you. We will go ahead and drop a link in the chat. We'll also put a link in the video description so that you can see it there. And this is really for those of you who are looking to take what you've learned this week and just bring it all full circle and gain that confidence and skill and knowledge. And I'll never forget something you said, Melanie, once when we were talking about the course, which is that, there's what we teach people in the sensory course is how to develop expertise. And I remember you saying expertise is, do you remember what you said now?
Yes, I definitely remember because I just want to make it clear. I didn't come up with this. I read this somewhere. Don't ask me where. I read a lot. But expertise is knowledge plus experience. So you can have years of experience. That doesn't necessarily mean you're an expert in anything if you don't have the knowledge of that thing. So it's both together when you have expertise.
Yeah, and I think that's like it's such a full circle moment because that's what, for those of you, if you are looking to specialize and this is something you really want to put your energy and effort into, or if you're just in your job and like you heard this week us talk about, sometimes when you don't have the tools, you kind of feel like you're plateauing and you just don't know where to go next. So the sensory course is really great for you if you are the type of person who wants to be able to assess the sensory needs yourself. I mean, essentially, that's one of the biggest benefits of the training is being able to do your own sensory assessments, not have to rely on other people to do them for you. And in the sensory course, you can learn, you could do your own assessments. And this assessment is very specific to figuring out what they need and then directing it toward building communication, right? So our whole focus, and hopefully that's obvious of this week, is how can we use sensory strategies to build communication? And I always tell parents, and we get questions all the time about different sensory needs. I always tell parents, the reason SLPs use sensory strategies is very different from the reasons why an OT would use them, or a teacher, or a parent, or someone themselves, right? We all have different reasons for using them. And the course is not going to teach you how to help kids tolerate toothbrushing or how to work on the skills that they need to get dressed or hold a pencil. Like that's not the point of the sensory in the course. The point is how can we use sensory as a way to get them regulated so that we can build their communication and help them to develop their language. So the course is open for enrollment. One other thing we announced is that we are giving a free case review to the first 10 people who sign up, which is when you send over a case, a kid that you have that you have just been going in circles in your head trying to figure out what to do next. And we basically work through that with you and tell you exactly what to do and exactly where to start. So we still have a few spots left for that. So if that is something that you're like, yes, I need that, please help me. I have a kid and I could desperately use another set of eyes on this kid. make sure to snag one of those last spots so that you can get that case review. And of course, you'll also get the entire course. All right, so let's dive into today. Let's go into this topic of what if it's too late? How do we get our clients regulated again when they have already reached that point of dysregulation? And you think back to the sensory seesaw, you could think about, we're talking about our tipped seesaw kids when we talk about this. Remember the sensory seesaw, a balanced seesaw represents a regulated child who is in their optimal learning zone, which is where we want them for sessions. A tipped seesaw represents a dysregulated child. So when we have kids who come in tipped, who come in dysregulated, if we just go in and start working on language, if we just go in and start hitting our communication goals, are we going to get the most out of our sessions? No. Hopefully you've learned that so far, right? We really need to bring them back to center. We need to bring them back to that optimal learning zone. And again, if you are someone who is coaching parents or working alongside parents, and you have someone come into your session and you're like feeling so much pressure, like, oh, this parent is going to wonder why I'm just giving deep squeezes instead of asking WH questions or whatever the goal is. This is where you bust out that analogy and you explain to the parent, this is how our brain works. This is what we do when we are dysregulated. Our brain's job is to survive. Our brain's job is to protect itself. I always like to give parents very specific examples that they would understand, from things like, imagine you just spent a whole day at Disneyland and you come home, Melanie's favorite place on earth, and you come home and like your kids want a million things from you. That is not, your brain is not in a place where you're going to be like, yes, let me solve through these problems. Like you're probably so overstimulated and dysregulated by then. All that you want is to sit in the dark, drink wine, and watch Real Housewives, right? Like we need to decompress after we've had so much stimulation. Or giving parents an example of like, imagine you just found out someone you loved passed away and you were just bawling, and then someone came over to you and said, hey, the rest of us at the office are going to order sandwiches. What did you want? Like your brain is not in the place where you're thinking about, let me answer this question from you. You're so dysregulated. You are just all in on your emotions and dysregulation at that moment. Okay. So the best way to explain this to parents or teachers or anyone you're working with is just by giving them examples of how this may affect them in real life, because like we have probably all learned so far this week, we are all affected by regulation, by sensory regulation, and we all have our different kind of preferences and things we like, and we all have our different triggers, and we all have our moments of dysregulation. Okay, so I want to first talk a little bit more about managing emotional dysregulation. Something that I see so often is, therapists will ask me a question like, hey, this kid is like so angry in the classroom and he's always trying to leave and he's always trying to hit people and he never wants to, engage in the activities, and something along that line. And then they're asking, what sensory strategies can I use to get him regulated? And I always say, first, think about their emotions, right? Like, what would help this kid more? Imagine yourself in a situation where you're so angry, like someone just said something to you, you're at a party and you're so angry that they said that, and you're like walking around huffing and puffing. Like, what's going to help you the most in that moment? Is it going to be someone dimming the lights, or is it going to be someone coming up to you and saying, oh my gosh, I heard what they said to you. I'm so sorry. That's so hard. Like, we really have to always focus on validating kids' emotions. And can sensory strategies help in those instances? Of course. Like, I would love for someone to come up, validate me, and then give me a big hug, right? That feels really good. So, but we have to make sure that we're always thinking about those two things together. And it's never just like ignore the emotions and then let's talk about the sensory system. Because a lot of what we see in our kids is that it's emotional dysregulation. It's coming from an emotional place. It's coming from a place of they don't feel safe in this environment, or they don't feel safe around the people they're around. And we need to help them feel safe in order to move forward.
You bring up so many good points, and I love the idea of thinking about how you would do it if it were you, because, and you guys probably all know the person that you vent to. If you're upset, and you know who to call when you're upset and who not to call, okay? Because I don't know if it's just you. I call my mom. I cannot call my husband, because if I call him and say like, I had a terrible day at work, my boss is just annoying. I'm just kidding. Jesse's my boss. But in the past, like it's just been awful. Here are all the problems I have, XYZ. What I don't want in that moment, and what my husband usually does, is try to fix the problem for me. Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? You could do this, you could do that. And in that moment, I'm not looking for a solution. I am looking to vent and feel validated.
You just want some ears.
Yes, I just want someone to listen. And so as professionals and therapists, we are problem solvers. We want to go in, there's a problem, we want to solve it. But if you rush past the problem and you go into solving and you don't acknowledge that they're upset, even if you don't understand it, like we need to acknowledge that, I understand that you're mad. I know that this is hard, or I see that you are struggling, or you need a minute, or something. Like we need to give people a moment to like sit in those emotions and not try to just solve the problem, because if that's the case, then they don't know. We never teach them how to process through the emotion. We just teach them how to move past it. And that's not super healthy either. You need to be able to take it and like figure out what you're going to do with it first.
And the thing is that when we use sensory strategies, it's such a personal approach. Like it's very like intimate in a way. Like we're coming into their personal space and we are trying to help their body feel good, right? So a child who does not have that connection to someone, or if they don't feel safe in your presence, they're not going to allow you to be able to then use these strategies, right? You have to first build the trust, and they have to be letting you into their space and their world so that you can then help them. So that was our first, what's it called? Soapbox. Next one. So next, when we think about if a child comes in dysregulated, what should I do? This is where you go back to what we talked about, which is try to figure out if they're dysregulated, where are they on that band, right? We've got our optimal level, and then we've got a child who might have a high level of arousal or a child who might have a low level of arousal. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, where on that band do you think that the child falls? We have got those kids that we generally picture as maybe our quote dysregulated kids, like coming in, running all over, grabbing toys, spilling toys, climbing things, taking out everything all at once. And then we have an entirely different type of dysregulated child, which might be the kid who comes in and they're so understimulated that it's almost like they're not alert to the situation and engaged, and they just come off as like being very indifferent to the activity that you're doing. And that's because they're not being stimulated enough to get into that optimal level. So a child comes in dysregulated, you figure out, where are they? Do they have this lower level of arousal, or do they have a higher level of arousal? And what do I need to do to get them into that optimal zone? And this is going back to strategies that we have talked about, which is if the child has a high level of arousal, this is when we use our calming strategies. If they have a lower level of arousal, this is where we use our alerting strategies to bring them up. And again, always consider what role the environment plays in this situation. And it's almost like it's too easy sometimes. Like we get so hyper focused on trying to figure out like what strategies to use, that I think sometimes we forget to look at the big picture of like what is going on in the environment, what is going on in the room that might be causing this dysregulation. And maybe your therapy room looks different than it normally does. Maybe you had a stressful week and you have extra clutter. Maybe you left your lunch on your desk for too long and now it smells like tuna fish, and you don't smell it because you've been there all day, but the kid comes in and it immediately dysregulates them. Egg salad, that would be another good example. Melanie just gave a look of disgust, right? But it's like those are little things that can potentially cause a child to become dysregulated right when they come in. But it is not uncommon that we hear therapists say that the child is dysregulated from the moment they step in the door. And tell us in the chat if that happens to you, right? I think a lot of us, we have kids where they step in the door and we know they're dysregulated immediately. And this is when we want to pull out those strategies. So again, calming strategies are going to be things that we might do slowly, softly, low intensity, rhythmic, predictable, versus strategies that are going to be alerting might be faster or higher intensity or less predictable or more new to them, things that they've never done before or experiences that they've never had before. And depends on your work setting, what you will learn after doing this for a long time and after seeing many different types of kids is that you're going to kind of have like this bag of tricks of things that you just pull out. Did you find that, Melanie, that you just had like your go-to strategies for different types of kids?
100%. And spaghetti arms is definitely like top for me. Kids love it. I mean, I was doing it for my child at T-ball the other day, and then all the other kids are like, what are you doing? And so then I gave spaghetti arms to the whole T-ball team, and the parents are looking at me like, what is she doing? But they love it.
I need video proof or it didn't happen. Yeah, so you'll see, and you guys have heard me talk about the hello song, like that will be a go-to. Like if a kid comes in dysregulated and needs some calming input, singing softly to them and really trying to maybe give them some deep squeezes or some really, dimming the lights. There are just going to be things that you're not even going to have to think about because it's going to be so second nature to you when you see the child that you know exactly what to do with them.
People in the chat were talking about this too. I'm still thinking about Selena with the chairs, like she just prepared ahead of time, like no chairs in the room before that kid gets there. Like that was just part of her routine now. Like it just becomes second nature. She didn't act like it was like revolutionary, but I'm still days later thinking about how amazing that was.
I know. So good. Yeah. I was lots of Selena fangirling happening because of that. That was really good. Okay, so you guys have from your workbook from this week, you should by now have lots of different strategies that you've written down and things that you want to try. We also wanted to just talk about like how to address language in those moments of dysregulation. What should we do? Our job is we are SLPs. Our job is communication. Our job is to build language. So what are we doing in those moments? And of course, depends on the kid and what they need. But a few pointers are, one, to start with just overall decreasing demands. So that might mean using less language. That might mean using less complex language. That might mean using less directions. That might mean using less questions, asking less questions, right? So the standard things that we do to decrease demands are going to make a huge difference here. And I kind of like go back to that like parenting mode. Like if you had a really upset like baby, toddler, what are the things that you might say like, I know, and just like those comforting, I don't know, it's not coming to me.
No,
those comforting words.
I know is one, and now my son's got to the point where he'll go, don't say I know.
That's so great. He already knows. Yeah, but it's like those kind of go-to phrases of like, I know it's all going to be okay. Like depending on the kid's age, like shushing them or patting their back, right? Like there's a lot that we can do just to help them by not putting too many language demands on them. Okay, because if there's one way to further dysregulate a dysregulated kid, it is to have them come in, ask them questions, give them directions, hold things over their head. Like, well, I know you want to do the iPad, but we can't do that because we have to do this first. Like, all of those kind of like classic structured therapy moves, those are not going to help us. We need to just be very validating for them in that moment. So we got some really good questions, and a lot of them are like, some were specific questions, but kind of like a bigger picture message, and we wanted to answer some of those. So I'm just kind of going to go through some of the ones that we felt would be the most beneficial for everyone to hear. So, okay, first one. It was a question about, so it was back to when we were talking about giving kids what they want versus giving them what they need. So just to jog your memory, we talked about how, you know, sensory preferences are going to be those things that a child loves and a child enjoys. And the thing is that sometimes kids know that they really want those things, but that might not be what their system needs in that moment. So I had given you guys the example of the little boy whose moms let him spin for hours and then he threw up the rest of the day. Okay, so he loved spinning, but at some point he didn't need any more spinning. So this question was about, what do we do and how do we transition kids from doing what they want to then doing what they need? So she had put an example of a child who's on a yoga ball bouncing. What if he's bouncing and he's getting himself too excited and we need to start giving him some calming input at that moment? What should we do at that point? And this is like one of my favorite things about sensory strategies, that we talk about this a lot in our course, which is the different combinations and ways that we can use sensory strategies. Because I never would like force a kid off of a ball if that's really what they wanted to do, right? Like I would never be like, no, you've had enough and your body is too excited. And I mean, maybe I would say like, it looks like your body is really excited right now. But I would never like force it or take it away if that is something that they really wanted to do. So in a case like that, this is just like one random example, but I might dim the lights while they're still on the ball, and then maybe like give them deep squeezes while they're bouncing, or like give them little tugs on their arms while they're bouncing to give them some deep pressure. And then I would probably lower my energy and I might start singing more softly. And then maybe like we would be able to transition then from like bouncing on the ball to having them like roll a little bit on the ball, right? So I'm really glad that that question was asked, because I don't want you guys to feel like you have to rip away a sensory activity that they're loving. I don't think that's the case at all. It's just that now we figure out how can we combine what they're doing with other sensory inputs that are going to be more calming if the child's getting to a place where they're too excited, so that we don't have to.
Question for you, Jessie, because I love that example, but I want to take it a step further and ask you, how are you addressing the child's communication goals while you're doing that?
Oh my God, that's such a great question. Are you talking about the transition, or are you talking about
or like being on the ball? So like you're saying, I'm not going to make him get off the ball. I think a lot of times therapists are like, okay, he has to get off the ball now because it's time to work on X. Oh, we have to work on this goal X. So
yes.
if he's on the ball or you're rolling the ball on him, how are you working on their communication goals?
Great cue, Melanie. So I don't know if I've said this week or not, but I do a lot of singing. And maybe I did say that because I do feel bad for the children when I do so much. But for me, there's no greater way to build language than singing. That's like one of my favorite things. And on top of that, doing different routines with kids. So we do a lot of like different creating routines so that kids know there's a start, middle, and end to the routine. And then when we get to the end, we can either go do something else or we can start the routine again, right? But we always have their communication goals in mind when we are doing that, so that we are targeting those. Do you have an
That
example, Melanie,
I was
that you
going
were
to say
thinking of?
that just like brings me to one of my favorite topics of Gestalt language, because we know that, and we're talking about sensory, we know that a lot of autistic people have sensory differences. We also know that a vast majority of autistic people are Gestalt processors. So when you're using singing, it's a double whammy because that's really helpful for our Gestalt processors. And I love that you also said using routines, because I think it's important to remember when we talk about Gestalt processors, they are also Gestalt cognitive thinkers. The word Gestalt in German literally means a unit, like a whole. So when I say a Gestalt cognitive processor, their brain is thinking in these chunks, in these units, in these wholes. So these routines are really helpful because A, they know what to expect, and B, then they're probably already routine oriented, and they probably have their routines that they like to go through to completion. And so it's just such a good way when you embed a routine to have a structure that then you can either follow that structure for children who need it, or a bouncing point to change that structure for kids who need more novelty. Now you've established this is how it's going to go. And for kids who need more alerting input, like singing the hello song, you can sing it calmly, or you can sing it with spaghetti arms. So you've created that, built in there. And I think it's just, we talk about language. You guys, maybe this was just me, but I kind of became like a TPT addict for a little while. And I was like, we have all these worksheets and we have all these flashcards, and like, this is learning. It's like, I'm going to work on this goal, and I have this resource specifically to work on this goal. And what I realized is that there's so much natural language and communication that comes up just by play. And it takes a lot more of a creative mind or someone who's open to doing those things to do that on a yoga ball or figure out how you can target those goals. But it's going to feel more natural, and the carryover is going to be better when it's just coming up in a routine and you're singing versus, okay, we're going to bounce on the ball, and then we're going to go do this worksheet, and then we're going to bounce on the ball, and then we're going to do this worksheet. And it's not to say you can't do that, because as kids get older, you may need something for more skilled, if you're working on like a very specific, or if you're working with grammar with your Gestalt processors, maybe there's, something tangible you want to use, but just,
Yeah, especially if they're
yeah.
hyperlexic and do well with the visuals,
But I just think I think we get caught up in, we're working on these goals and we have to work on these goals in this way. And then you try to bring sensory into it and it still feels separate. So I love what your idea of how do you work on communication? By singing, by creating routines, by doing all these things, giving yourself the permission to not, print off something off TPT. You still can if you want to, but I promise you, the moment I started embracing this, I saved myself a ton of money, not buying a bunch of stuff off TPT anymore. Like truly
and the
following the guidelines.
printer,
Yes,
the
and ink. Oh my gosh, ink, laminating. Do you know how much time I spent laminating? Like, no more. We don't do that anymore.
We have like a joke in my office because you'll see in the like paper, the unused paper tray, like where you print something accidentally, you put it in. It's like people will print like the whole cover page, like full ink, and I'll be like, excuse me.
Don't do that.
Anyway, tangent. So, but yes, it's all about embedding the language in these sensory activities 100%. And I think like one thing that trips people up is they're like, well, what should I do first? And then what should I do next? And I always like press a hot button. Is that a phrase? No. Jesus.
It is now. Yeah.
Like when you, no? Okay. I'm going to make one.
I see where you're going with it.
Yeah. It's like
push
a
people's buttons, hot topic.
Yeah. A combo of those two. It's like I push a hot button on people when I talk about how I don't use visual schedules, and it always like gets people really frazzled when I talk about that. And it's always like there's fine print, like, wait, I didn't say ever. I just said I don't use them in my therapy sessions, right? Like, are there times for visual schedules? Are they helpful for kids? Yes. At home and daily routines and at school and like things like that. Yes. I'm not saying there's never a place for them. What I'm saying is to me, I would never use visual schedules in my sessions because it doesn't matter to me what we do and how long we do it for and what order we do it in. Like if we know a kid well enough, then we should be able to just have them walk in and then we go with the flow, and they should be able to do whatever activity they want and we can still target their goals. Like it's definitely like something you learn through more experience in time, but it's that flexibility we can have to go with the flow just gives us more flexibility in how we write our goals and how we target our goals and the activities we choose. And it's just, we don't need to have like a set schedule. Like my set schedule is hello song, everything else in the middle, goodbye song.
I love that so much. Because I will tell you, and I have a schedule for my son at home, but it's to do the stuff he doesn't want to do, right? Like this, we have to go to the bathroom on there because he struggles with wanting to do that. He can hold it forever. I don't understand. But like brushing teeth and all of those things he doesn't want to do. And there's a reason for that. I think it was, what's the book? Is it Drive by Daniel Pink, where he talks about that intrinsic motivation? And there are times, yes, where you have to use schedules, but it's really when the child, there's really like, you're trying to extrinsically motivate them. And there are times you are going to have to, like brushing teeth, get it, potty training, get it. But we should want them to come into our sessions and want to be there and be internally motivated. And you can try, but it's really hard to just make someone communicate. So you're going to have much better results if they're internally motivated to communicate versus externally motivated because they know they have to check this off this piece of paper or whatever.
Okay, I can't even go down the intrinsic motivation road because I love that stuff so much. I will talk all day, but I love that. So we are just going to do a quick recap for you of what to do when the child is already dysregulated. We're not talking about preventative measures. We mean when they show up dysregulated, what to do. One, always validate them. We know how important that is. And when we talk about validate, show up for them as an emotionally supportive, nurturing, warm, loving presence for them. Okay. Two is we want to. What was number two, Melanie?
Number two is we want to figure out where are they at in terms of their level of arousal. So
that was number two. I thought I was missing something. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So figure out their level of arousal. Is it low? Is it high? And then three is provide the strategies, right? So provide the calming strategies if they need calming, provide alerting strategies if they need alerting. And then we will take it to step 4, which is moving into the preventative measures of if you know what dysregulated them in the first place, trying to plan for that for the future.
Don't leave egg salad in your office.
And don't leave egg salad in your office. If there's one takeaway from today, it's that. So we are really excited to introduce you to one more therapist this week. So we are introducing you to Mary Beth. She took the Inside Out certificate course, I want to say in the first cohort, and we couldn't have her live, but she sent us a video that we are going to play for you guys. And she's just someone who like I always think about because she's just out there like doing so many incredible things with like a compassion and love of what she does like no other. Like you will definitely be able to sense that from her. So I am going to move you guys over there for a second.
Hello, my name is Mary Beth, and I am a speech therapist with over a decade of experience in the field. I've worked in various settings throughout my career, including a school district where I spent 7 years as an SLP on a waiver. Additionally, I've worked internationally in Southeast Asia as a homeschool teacher, teaching subjects with speech language therapy approaches for about a year. And for the past 6 years, I've been working in private practice as an SLPA, where I've honed my skills and gained practical insights into the world of speech language pathology. Like many SLPs and SLPAs, I faced challenges in my career, An area that I consistently struggled with was managing behaviors such as meltdowns, distractibility, and eloping, to name a few. But despite my best efforts, I found it challenging to understand and address these issues until I collaborated with a special education teacher who introduced me to sensory approaches. And this introduction to sensory approaches piqued my interest because she was amazing at regulating her students while finding joy in the moment. I wanted so badly to be a clinician, to show that type of confidence, connection, and control. So during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, I decided to take a deep dive into sensory approaches paired with speech and language pathology. I thought, how can I learn about sensory approaches while still ethically staying within my scope of practice? So I conducted a thorough Google search and stumbled upon Jesse Ginsburg's free videos, Instagram reels, and Instagram posts on using sensory approaches as an SLP. And these videos inspired me, and I implemented the little nuggets I learned from Jesse into my work. And just from the free video she shared, the results were instant, and I was amazed at the positive impact that sensory approaches could have on speech language therapy. So despite the financial strain, I knew that adding sensory approaches to my toolbox would be an investment in my practice. I saved up and invested in the sensory course for SLPs, which proved to be a game changer for me. And the course has brought so much fruit into my sessions and given me a newfound confidence in my methodologies. I gained a new perspective and set of tools to help me manage behavior more effectively. And I am now connecting with my clients on a deeper level, making me a better active listener and helping my clients feel accepted and heard while addressing their speech language goals. So if you are looking to take your speech language therapy practice to the next level, dedicate yourself to your craft and have the willingness to invest in the sensory course for professional development. I guarantee that you won't regret it. Acquiring knowledge on sensory and adding sensory tools to your therapy skill set will make an extraordinary difference in the lives you serve, have a positive impact on parents, caregivers, and teachers, and give you confidence in your skill set. I am so grateful for Jesse's mission in wanting to teach SLPs sensory, because without having the knowledge of sensory, I don't think I could target all my speech and language goals without knowing how to regulate my clients. Invest in your practice, invest in your career, invest in yourself.
Okay, I have to say this because this was when we asked Mary Beth, like, hey, would you mind sharing about your experience? I was like, if you could just share with everyone, like what things were kind of like before for you and what things are like now. And then she basically just like did an infomercial for the course. Like I love her so much. But we're just very glad you got to hear from her and hear from someone else who's out there and doing it with so much passion and just so much love for what she does. And I'm sure you guys can like just sense that from listening to her. And again, as a reminder, the Inside Out course is open for enrollment. And we know that therapists are so busy. Like if there's one thing in the world we don't have, it is time. And that is why we figured out a way for you to get your sensory certificate in a 1-month period if you can dedicate just 15 minutes a day. So if you have got 15 minutes a day and you want to jump into your sensory certificate, that is all it takes. As a reminder, you could watch it on your phone. There is an app. You can watch it on your computer, but you really don't have to carve out time to do this. It is like something you could do in the grocery store, something you could do in the bathroom when you're trying to escape from your kids or something. Heard that from a friend. That's not something that I do myself personally. Okay, but if you are looking to take the sensory training and really hone your expertise and really grow that, and this is a specialty area that you want to dive deeper into yourself, we promise this will be completely transformative for your therapy. And I am so happy to be able to say that so confidently now after so many therapists going through our program and saying that that's how revolutionary and transformative it has been for their practice. It really is like the missing piece to being able to better support our autistic kids specifically, you know, any kids with sensory differences. But a lot of therapists have said that exactly, like this felt like the missing piece. If we're thinking about the language staircase, and a lot of things we learn in school are how to target language. Maybe we've even done some programs about like how to help kids with engagement, right? But it's just, there hadn't been any resources for SLPs to really learn about sensory and regulation and how that affects their ability to do all of those other things up the staircase. So if you enroll in the sensory certificate course, you're getting all of the trainings, which are all recorded. You are getting trained in sensory assessments by Dr. Winnie Dunn, the OT, who is the author of the sensory profile, one of the most world-renowned occupational therapists. You are getting bonus lectures from autistic therapists. You are getting trained in how to use the assessment, and then you are getting the assessment so that you are able to assess your own kids whenever you want. Plus, you are getting tons and tons of resources and guides on therapy planning just to make your life so much easier. It is all a very step-by-step process. It's you start and you do this and then you do that. And it's not like loosey-goosey material content all over. It's very structured, it's very streamlined, and it really is meant to be something that is so easy for you to complete and then go ahead and implement. So we will go ahead and drop that link in the chat again. Anything else, Melanie?
I was just going to say my favorite part of it, and someone asked this question the other day, so I wanted to bring it. It was like, you know, you've given so many recommendations, like here's a list of calming strategies and alerting. Like, is there a list somewhere? And there is, and it's in the course. Anything that you could possibly think of, like what are her favorite toys? What toy would you use for this? What toy would you use for that? What's an alerting toy? What's a calming toy? We have those in the course. So when you're going through and you're learning, not only is it you learn, okay, what they need, but then there's like a list upon list. So, and I guarantee you a lot of the stuff on that list you already have. So you don't, it's not like now you have to go on Amazon and go crazy. I mean, you can if you want to, because I'm not going to stop you. I love Amazon, but anything that you could, like, if all of the guesswork is taken out of it too. It's not only, okay, now I've done the assessment, now what? Now here's a list of any activity you could possibly use to address that. And it's all done for you. So it's 15 minutes a day now, and then all your therapy planning for the rest of your life is done.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, please let us know if you have any questions. Again, we want to thank you so much for spending this week with us. It means so much to us that you are here, and we just want to say congratulations, because it is not easy to find this time in your schedule, but you just did it. You just spent 5 hours of this week with us to better be able to support your clients. So you should definitely take it's Friday, so take a moment and go relax and congratulate yourself for spending all of this time dedicated toward bettering your training and the way that you are able to support your kids. So you could find us on social as always, and thank you guys for being here. Goodbye.